It's been almost 2 months since my last devlog, and some things have changed. First of all, I updated to the 5.2 version of Unreal Engine because I wanted to test out the new PCG mechanics. I made a whole new map and I spent a long time making it, and at the end it wasn't really good. So I searched for different ways to make maps, and I found a plugin called TerrainMagic, which has an option to make terrain clips. So with help of these terrain clips, you can just stamp out the height maps on the Unreal landscape. For example, if I have a height map of a mountain, I can place a mountain on the middle of a landscape and use the terrain clip, and the landscape will deform. I'll leave a link in the description. So if we go into the details, I made height maps in Gaia and then exported them to Unreal Engine and then used the terrain clips to make the landscape. It's a little bit different than the previous map that you saw. For example, there's a river missing and the terrain is a little bit more noisy, and I made a different terrain material, I mean landscape material. I kind of don't like the color of the grass, so I have to fix that, but otherwise it's good. Regarding the new map, I really like these mountains in the distance. I think they look really epic, I guess, and the forest looks good as well now. And I also tried to box in the player so he cannot see that he's just walking on a plane, so he can so the hills and mountains and things like that actually block his view. It helps with the immersion. I don't know how am I gonna fix the problem where if you go on the high point, for example on the mountain, you can see that the world is just a plane. Next up, I started learning PCG. So if you don't know what PCG is, it's procedural content generation. It's similar to geometry nodes in Blender. It's a little bit different though. So basically you have a graph that spawns a bunch of points on the landscape or on the spline or something like that. Depends what you want. And on those points you can spawn different static meshes, for example. With the help of PCG, I made this forest. I had some trouble with splines. I'll get into that later. So first of all, what I did, I remodeled all the trees. So now they look a little bit better. I made some trunks and stubs for the dead trees. And I modeled some more mushrooms. And I modeled even some saplings for the trees. Then I made a ground material. As you can see, there are now leaves on the ground. I made it using Blender. So basically just modeled the leaves and scattered them manually across the whole plane that was a brown color. And then I colored these leaves. Or first I colored them, then I duplicated them, and then I scattered them. And then I rendered the material, I mean the picture, and I also rendered a normal map and imported all this stuff into the Unreal Engine. And I added the Unreal map and the material into the landscape material. So now the problems with the spline. I won't go into the details of PCG, but if anyone needs this information, I guess it will be helpful. So I was playing around with get spline and spline sampler nodes, but I couldn't figure out how to make the points spawn on the actual landscape and not just on the spline. Turns out there is a project node that you can hook up to your landscape output, and it will project the points from the spline onto the landscape. So that way you can use spline and your landscape information at the same time. Then I played around with normal noise and filter noise. So basically with these nodes you can dictate on how much of an angle a point will spawn. And I basically made it so that the foliage and the trees don't spawn on the slopes like on the hills. Instead, on the slopes, stones spawn. And maybe I'll later add some foliage to spawn on the slopes. I also had some problems regarding the quantity of the trees that I spawned for the forest. The problem wasn't with the, thanks to nanite, the problem wasn't the tree count or the poly count, it was the shadows. So I activated a little thing called virtual shadow map, and it turns out that it works great. My FPS jumped from like 20 FPS to 70 to 80. The point is, if I understand correctly, the virtual shadow mapping works this way. So the shadow map is recorded, or I guess the shadow map is taken, and if the shadow doesn't change, meaning if the object doesn't move or something like that, the shadow stays the same, so the engine doesn't need to update that shadow constantly. This works great for static objects, but moving objects more expensive. Then I moved on to PCG grasslands, so procedurally generated grasslands. So previously I was using the grass map to spawn grass. But now I'll be probably using PCG, although I have some problems with it again. So I made it so that grass doesn't spawn on certain slopes. As you can see, the grass only spawns on the green areas, not the dirt, the brown dirt areas. On the dirt areas, only stones spawn. Then I made a dirt material. Again, I used Blender. I just took a plane, deformed it a little bit, and added stones, low poly stones to it, and then I rendered it out, and I rendered the normal map as well, although I do not know how to implement the normal map only to the ground and not the grass material. I also have some trouble spawning PCG grass on the big map, the actual map, because I get every time I try to spawn it, I get an error that the PCG tried to spawn too much points, so I have to figure a way around that. Now let's get to the coding features that I programmed during these months. Okay, let's move on. Next up, I need to make a PCG graph for the river and the old forest. I have some problems with the PCG graph for the river because I don't know exactly how to spawn points on the spline, and I want to figure out how to make a material to spawn under the spline, so I need to figure that out. And then after that I actually want to implement some features like, I don't know, inventory, hit points, combat system and things like that. The problem is that most of the features that I want to implement include animating, and I really don't want to animate, so I'll probably buy some assets on the Unreal market or something like that, or maybe I'll force myself to animate. Yeah, I think that's it for the video. Maybe I missed something, I don't know, hope not. I think there is a little bit of a problem with my devlogs, and that is that they are not precise enough, not thorough enough. So maybe the problem is I already forgot what I implemented during these 2 months, so probably I'll just make recordings as I go along, so I have the solution to every problem already recorded when I make this video. So yeah, so soon you can expect a new lore video. I don't know what I'll be talking about yet. There is a lot of lore that I would like to make videos about, but the problem is I want to make a good video. So yeah, I need to train a little bit more, I guess. And that's it.